to change this country and to make sure that each one of us as Kenyans is comfortable, we need to re-engineer our ways in how we conduct ourselves in the field of agriculture. Mr. Speaker, and when I speak about agriculture, is in horticulture, in apiculture, in livestock and everything else. So, Mr. Speaker, first of all, what I want to do, considering that agriculture is an evolved function, agriculture, where I will sit, if approved by you as a minister, will basically more deal with the issue of policy. Crop husbandry is in the domain of our county governments. The first thing I want to do is to have a serious sitting with the governors, and possibly, because I believe in teamwork, I believe in building proper networks, have also a meeting with their CEC's agriculture to see how together we can be able to transform agriculture. Mr. Speaker, I know we have a problem in this country. I know the youth can easily be employed if we were to do our agriculture right and correctly. And I'm happy Mbozi Sholei's children is really interested in doing agriculture. But if you were to speak to very many young men and women, and whose mindset I am willing and ready to engage to change, is that some of them have taken agriculture as a form of punishment. Many of them are afraid of that, and many of them, because of failure for a guaranteed way of trying to assess what incomes or what you can be able to predictably be able to assess from a crop, have made it very difficult for many of our children to engage in it. So I want to pursue possibilities of how we will be able to encourage our young people and everybody else to get into the farms and do it. Mr. Speaker, I want to invite, including all the members of parliament here, we cannot be crying of lack of food when we are not doing it by ourselves. Before we get out there to cry, there is famine. What is it that we are doing as leaders from the family level to feed ourselves first of all? I want to ask, to call for a candid, robust discussion on how each one of us can be able to feed himself and run away from the reliance of going to markets to buy food when you are not sure where that food has come from.
The question she asked you, the Honorable Linturi, is that what are your plans to ensure that farming becomes more profitable and farmers are assured of a predictable income?
Mr. Speaker.
Then combine that with a question from Ichungwa that your docket is the highest in employment multiplier effect. What are you going to do to ensure that agriculture becomes a major job creation engagement? Ichungwa, that was your question, right?
Yes.
Yes. And how you'll dismantle milk cartels in the sector. Take a minute to answer those three questions.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, we now have to see on how we can hand value to our agricultural products. Those that are doing, for example, dairy, we must know how we can be able to engage them from their own farms, from an area where probably you can be able to bring in farmers to pull together. See, for example, collect enough milk, see how we can have processors that can be able to hand value to our milk so that we're able to produce other I want to see other products from processed milk. That way we will be able to add value. Farmers may be able to get good return from their investments in agriculture. Mr. Speaker, if we were to be able to seriously subsidize on farm inputs, fertilizer, seeds, we will be able to bring the cost of production of our food, our food from whatever cost it is, because government would have taken some bit of cost by providing subsidies. That we may be able to encourage the farmer to create and see more value from his produce, from whatever he does on a daily basis. Mr. Speaker, I also want to say that if we were to make sure that there is good return, and if we were really to ensure that once a farmer is able to predict what price he may be able to get from the market, then we'll be able to encourage. I want to, Mr. Speaker, to adopt the technology so that I can be able to link markets. And from a platform, when we are sitting by application of e-technology, one can be able to check and know if I'm doing carrots and I'm in Meru or I'm in Washingishu, what is the going price of a kilo of carrots in Kisumu, in Nairobi, and whichever other market. So that way, one may be able to take his produce on how, or to any market that will give him the highest return. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to discuss with the county governments to implement the warehouse receipt system. The warehouse receipt system, Mr. Speaker, if implemented, we will be able to hold our food and our produce and be able to sell when markets or the prices of food are good enough for return of investment. Ichungwa raised a question on how we will be able to deal with the cartels in the ministry, and we intend to dismantle them. Mr. Speaker, I also want to say that I want to ensure that when I get to the ministry with your approval, God willing, then I want to have a Kenya Farmers database. The Kenya Farmers database will be able to show me or tell me how many farmers do we have that are doing milk, that are doing cabbage, that are doing maize, or whatever type of a crop that there is. And that way, even when we get to making subsidies to the farmer, then we can, with precision, say which farmer is going to benefit from what subsidy, whether it's seed, whether it's fertilizer, and that we also would require an e-voucher system so that in partnership with our National Cereals and Produce Board or agrovets, we can be able to make sure that person that really benefits from the subsidies that we'll be giving as government are the really people that require that particular support. To increase productivity, Mr. Speaker, and for value, we also may have to go an extra mile to educate our farmers on what best crop grows where. And with that kind of data, then we will be able to maximize on productivity and avail information to our farmers so that you do not plant barley in an area that requires you to plant rice. Or if you just wake up in Meru and decide how to plant maize here, yet Meru cannot do very well in that particular ecological zone. So getting information to farmers will be critical. Moving along with them will be very important, and customer education and training will be very critical if we really have to produce maximally and farmers get really value of their produce. Mr. Speaker, to deal with cartels, as Ichung was saying, these cartels are the same are the cartels that when you give subsidies of fertilizer, they wait for the fertilizer, buy it, store, repack, and then sell at the exorbitant prices. We will require, Mr. Speaker, to really map out or be able to get the numbers that are supposed to benefit from these subsidies, and this I intend to use an e-platform where we will have a record of all the farmers that we are talking about, so that the final beneficiaries of our subsidies, our knowledge of the information that we want to disseminate as a ministry, then go to the right people.
Thank you. I'll take 5. So note them and answer them. And this time, let's be conscious with time. And members, 1 question each. Junette, Owen Bayer, Robert Mbui, Ferdinand Wanyonyi, Murugara. Everybody will have a chance.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I wanted to ask the nominee, when he was giving the story of his life, how we went through, whether he has ever been to a seminary. Whether you have been enrolled to a seminary one time. But more importantly, what plan do you have to the collapsed sugar industry? Like Moroni, Chemeil, Sony, Mumias, and Nzoia companies. How do you intend to revive them?
Thank you, Speaker. The President, in his wisdom, has separated the Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation. But we also know that statistics show that grain-fed agriculture has failed this country, and irrigation is the way to go to spur agriculture. But as it stands now, if approved by this committee, you'll be Minister for Agriculture, but the docket for irrigation, for which you will depend on largely to produce food, is in another ministry. How do you intend to sync that so that your hands are not tied, given that the President in his speech said that we intend to increase irrigation to 1.4 million in 3 years? How would you reconcile that? Will your hands be tied such that you'll not produce food because you'll say irrigation is not in your hands? And also you find that there are some high productive areas in this country that have not been looked at positively by the previous regimes. Farming in coconut, in cashew nut, in Bixa at the coast has not been given the due attention that it is supposed to have. And areas like coast have not been helping in growing the GDP in this country. And yet there's high potential in those areas. Look at these 2 questions, nominee. How do you work in the Ministry of Agriculture to support this country to grow the GDP in agriculture? Thank you.
Robert.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Speaker. You know, Kenya is grappling with the drought, and a lot of Kenyans are going hungry now. So this is an extremely important docket, because the person who holds that docket has to deal with the issue of food security and ensure that Kenyans don't starve to death. Now, I want to, and you know, Chair, the issue of integrity is also critical in helping us determine the suitability of a candidate to any office. Now, in the 11th Parliament that I served with the Honourable nominee here, while he was serving as MP for Igembe South, the nominee presented a petition to members of Parliament to sign for him so that he could remove the then CS for devolution on the scandal that was rocking this country of about 1.9 billion of NYS. And members of Parliament did sign that petition. Mr. Speaker, I was one of them because he convinced me, and there were really weighty issues. But on the day that this petition was to be read on the floor of the House, the nominee did not show up, and did not show up for quite a while after that. And when he resurfaced, that issue seemed to have been put under the carpet. Maybe because we do not want a CS that might also abandon farmers. Maybe he can tell us why he abandoned members of Parliament.
Ferdinand.
I'm laughing kidogo because I was also in that Parliament.
but I didn't know those details. Mheshimiwa, you talked about the warehouse receipts, and I think you don't understand the concept. I want to give you the light on the warehousing receipts. Is where the farmer takes the goods to the warehouse and is given a title deed for whatever quantity equivalent to the value that you have taken. Then from there you can use a title deed to do business, to do other business. That concept, actually, I am one of those that worked on it from India. So my question is, and you seem to know something about it, what are you going to do to open up more warehouse and receipt outlets in the country to be able to do business, so that the people can be able to take their goods to the warehouse, get the receipts, and do business? Thank you.
Wakili. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nominee, drought is ravaging the country. And the reason why Kenyans are suffering is due to the fact that we do not have a good policy on food security. Matters food are governed by the Agriculture and the Food Act, which vests execution in the Agriculture and the Food Authority. We've been told recently, especially by your predecessor, that the ministry contemplates repealing the Agriculture and the Food Act and also abolish the authority so that it can deal with individual crops instead of dealing with crops lumped together for purposes of production, marketing, and distribution. In your own estimation, is that a good idea for the country? And is it going to serve us more positively, or we are digging ourselves into a grave as far as food is concerned?
Thank you. You can answer those 5.
Thank you, Chairman. Mheshimiwa Junet, I asked about the revival of the sugar industry, and I think that's a good question coming from him because it comes from that side. Mr. Speaker, I think the sugar industry plays or employs very many people, and is a source of employment to our young people and others that work from that particular end. And when I interacted with the sugar companies when I was the chairman of public investment, most of these sugars companies were making losses. I think it is the time, Mr. Speaker, I think we really require a serious discussion, because the investment of government in a number of these sugar industries is huge. We've had bailouts by government to these sugar companies a number of times, and we are required to check on whether there is real return on the money that government invests in them, and then open a candid, robust discussion with all stakeholders in trying to understand how best we can revive the sugar industry. Mr. Speaker and Chairman, I would ask Junet to become part of this discussion, because you may understand this area better, but I am told over here that there has been discussions on how to privatize these companies for maximum productivity and for profitability. If that is the direction we may end up going, then, Mr. Speaker, and since all stakeholders who will be involved, and if we are to go that way, of course, Parliament will be involved, then at a personal level, I wouldn't have any problem, because I will not be there to dictate. I will only be guiding the process, and it will be all inclusive, all consultative, so that we have one common ground on how we need to revive this important sector in our economy. Mr. Speaker, I think when asked how I will be able to produce food when the irrigation docket is not in my domain, and I want to say that government works collectively. I am sure, and we cannot succeed without water, want to grow food without water. And anybody that cared to listen to my boss's speech yesterday during the Mashujaa celebrations, he has offered or inviting people to partner to come up with around 100 dams that will be able to assist us in providing water for irrigation. I want and I believe that because cabinet decisions are collective, I will personally be able to speak to my sister Alice Wame because she is in that particular docket, and because we must all deliver as government on how we can break those perceived barriers, if any, so that at least together we can be able to grow food, together we can build the synergy and ensure that our country is food secure, because our reliance on food, our rain-fed agriculture, Mr. Speaker, is not anything that we can really rely on. An interesting question was also raised by my good friend Mheshimiwa Amboi on my integrity, or whether I will run away and leave the farmers or leave the farmers alone. Mr. Speaker, even as we discuss that issue, I think for those that have been bunge with me, because I think we've served the longest, you have served the longest in the House, and I think I'm the second longest serving. I think my record also speaks for itself in view of the committees that I chaired and the recommendations I've done as a committee, which went to the extent of indicting ministers when we sat in the same house as ministers. And the latest being my investigation committee that I chaired, investigating the possible loss of money from the Ministry of Education by the acquisition of the Ruaraka land where the country lost 1.5 billion. I don't waver. I am incorruptible. You can only persuade me, Mr. Speaker. So to get to the withdrawal of this particular matter, because that matter, Mr. Speaker, it is true and a lot of support in the House. And Mr. Speaker, those that were in that parliament, when all this happened, I came to the chamber and rose on a point of order and a personal statements. And I documented every step that took place, what went on, who called who, where that letter was signed from, and that matter isn't. Unless if you allow, Mr. Speaker, I can mention. You know, Mr. Speaker, this country, you allow me to explain the circumstances.
Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, for those that have never known, you see, when a gun is put on your head, and you understand when you have a CEO who is almost a terrorist, then there are many people that cannot withstand the pressure, the intimidation, and the threats that exist. I can tell you the letter to withdraw was signed.
To withdraw the motion?
Yes. Was drafted by one J. Muturi. The letter I was asked to sign, Njomo called, Speaker Muturi was called from somewhere. He was along, I think in Kilimani, was told, go back to the house, there's a letter that's is being brought to withdraw that motion. Jomo Gichaka, past 8 o'clock, delivered the letter to the then Speaker, J. Muturi. Those are the circumstances that I found myself in, and you know.
Signed the letter?
Mr. Speaker, yes.
Point of order, Honorable
Yes.
Speaker. Point of order.
Yes, that's it.
Honorable
And the
Speaker,
President
point
was
of
there
order.
then. So, Mr. Speaker,
order.
that is the situation, that is the condition. And that is from that time when my relationship and him went sour. Because that thing has really tormented me. I've spoken about it, but members continue asking. They may not have known, just like all these others were all organized and planned by his agencies. Lastly, Mr. Speaker.
The question from Ferdinand and Murugara.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the warehouse system, receipt system was passed. It's a law that is in this country. It's supposed to be implemented by the county governments. It is the county government that is supposed to license warehouses. And I think that we will not succeed if we do not work very closely with the county governments. And I will deliberately and intentionally work very closely with the governors. I even want to, I will maybe proposing laws to even operationalize this more, Mr. Speaker, because I believe food security cannot be a function of the national government alone. If crop husbandry is in the hands of the governors must participate in ensuring that Kenya is food secure. Mr. Speaker, I want to encourage and I want to propose to the governors when we sit down, and by use of this system, because this system, unless my understanding is different from yours, is where the licensed warehouse will be able to mop up the produce in those particular areas. And because I am even told this system is a serious support from some donors and other financial institutions, where if you have a problem, you may be able to be paid up to a certain percentage of the value of your crop. That way, you address your immediate financial needs as when then the men and women in charge of houses are looking for good prices for that produce. This way, if the county governments were to do it professionally and organized in a good manner, then we will be able to ensure that in whatever part of this country, at least the amount of food held in our stores or in our houses are clearly known. And this way, Mr. Speaker, you can also encourage commodity exchange through these warehouses, so that if, for example, you do not have money and you have tomatoes, the other one has cabbages, and that's what you want, you can always agree on how to deal with it. So I want to ensure in the participation of governors, I also create county food reserves, so that the county food reserves will be able when there is need for immediate address in terms of our food solutions that we may have within the counties, then the counties can be able to come in and support it. So I want to assure you, Mr. Wanyonyi, we'll get a framework on how we can do it. In any case, just like I'm saying, this cannot be done without legislation. We will be getting back to you. We will be asking you to kindly support us in this particular matter.
Mr. Chairman. No, I wanted to make a clarification.
Yes.
If you allow me to.
Yes.
This, let me tell you that as I'm talking, this Parliament sent some people to South Africa. We saw how it's operating. The Ministry of Agriculture, for our case, will have a department, and already have a department, dealing with the warehousing system. In fact, as I'm talking, the outgoing minister opened a warehousing system in Kitale, which I witnessed, and I think 2 other places. So just tell us that if you are given the opportunity, you'll be able to come up, you'll be able to enforce the already established system, so that can be able to move, as you are saying. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I am willing and ready, if approved, to engage. And those systems that are functional.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't want to disturb. I wanted to wait for him to finish. But when Wanyonyi did, I thought maybe at this point I need to clarify that on the question I had asked, and this has to go on record, Chair, that on the day that this petition was to be presented to Parliament, it was not withdrawn, Mr. Speaker. It was on the order paper. But what happened is that the nominee did not show up. So that is a report that was in the House. That is what is unanswered. It was called out, and he wasn't there to move it. So I wanted that to be clear so that, for the record. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Speaker, I am not trying to defend myself, but he knows at what time, in most cases, the under papers are out. I've seen the Speaker was called very late in the night, and the letter was taken to him. So I was not in charge of the Secretariat of Parliament or how that got it there, but that is the truth. And I can always also go back to check the answer and what I recorded that particular time.
Point of order, Chair.
Speaker Murugara.
Yes, Mishi.
Point of order, Chair. Honorable Chair. Does that insinuate that the nominee is weak and cannot withstand political pressure?
If Nje Muturi can bully you to sign a letter.
Not by
Chair,
no.
Chair,
Mr. Speaker.
maybe, Chair, not to interrupt Linturi, but may I also make disclosure that it is, in actual fact, myself who got the Honorable Linturi to Jacaranda Hotel, if he remembers. And the circumstances then, if you know the kind of president we were dealing with, when Linturi tells you when you have a gun over your head, you really have no choices to make. And it is indeed true that letter was typed by Nje Muturi in the business center of Jacaranda Hotel. And I was then the vice chair of the Public Investments Committee, and I was directed by none other than President Uhuru Kenyatta to ship the Honorable Linturi out of this country in a trip that we were going to Turkey that weekend.
So you connived into undermining Linturi's integrity.
We did not connive, Honorable Speaker. And that's what I'm saying. It may not be a reflection of the Honorable Linturi.
Anyway, let's go on with other issues.
Or strength.
I'll now give the floor to Murugara. We have 6 minutes of your allotted time. Linturi.
Mr. Murugara asked whether I have intentions of disbanding AFA. Yeah, so just like I've said before, AFA is a creature of an act of parliament. And Mr. Speaker, a minister or a cabinet secretary has no power to amend or to do any other form of changes to any act of parliament. Parliament must be involved. I have not gotten there yet. I have not personally interacted with institutions that fall under AFA, and I will not be fair to say whether AFA is living to its mandate or not. But in your wisdom, it's the wisdom of this committee that you recommend me serve in that docket. Then one of the first things I'll be doing is to engage AFA and other stakeholders to understand really how we can either transform that institution, whether it's living up to its mandate. But just like when I was trying to inquire, I know it has some bit of challenges because I'm told it has no bond. Maybe probably it has remained dysfunctional, either for strategically or for any other reason, I do not know. But I will try to inquire and see how best we can be able to address the issues that touch on the mandate of AFA, and I will be involving the members of parliament kindly.
Posing Daoud Mishi Koech Amisi.
Thank you, Speaker.
Question each. We have 4 minutes.
Speaker, from where I come from, it is argued that you don't milk a stone, you only milk a cow. And I want to be on record, Speaker, because we are not making, or Chair, because we are not making any determination now, so that it's known by the time we are going to make our determination that the nominee is trying to use court to gag the committee from getting issues of integrity on him, Speaker. That is very critical. And to exit my question, therefore, for him is, there are 70% of this country is arid and semi-arid, or thereabout. And in those areas, they keep animals, cows, camels, goats, and so on. When it comes to the Ministry of Agriculture, it's about crops most of the time. Should you get an opportunity, Honorable Linturi, what new thing will you bring to this 70% people living in 70% of our country in terms of recognizing cows, camels, goats as assets, as investment, so that, Honorable Chair, they can be collateral. Somebody can go to bank and get some assistance. We are keeping things which don't help us, Honorable Chair, until when they are sold or they are slaughtered. So what will Honorable Linturi bring that is new, that will give hope to this 70% of the people living in this country? I thank you.
Dawood.
Thank you, Chair. Congratulations, Honorable Mithika. And I thank the President for nominating you. My question is, you stood for election as a governor, as you have already said, and you got more than about 190,000 votes, and that was good. You had a manifesto as a governor, and there is a manifesto of Kenya Kwanza. Could you probably tell us the cross-cutting issues between you and Kenya Kwanza, and if there were variances in your manifesto and Kenya Kwanza? You have said you will work with the governors. Will you work with our governor, Meru governor, in doing whatever you're going to be doing if you are put in this place? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, just before my question, I just want to add on what the nominee has just answered. Honorable Junet's question in terms of reviving the sugarcane industry. I also want to add that you also need to put in your plans the issue of cashew nuts, Bixa, and coconut industry, so that it just don't remain as a rhetoric during campaigns, but a real action to be done to ensure that we have this kind of industry. And my question would be, during Mashujaa Day yesterday, His Excellency the President has talked about